in these times, many of us have had to move our practices online. And for those of us who do practices like Indian dance classes or other similar contemplation or reflection practices, we've had the dilemma of whether it is possible to maintain the depth of the practices when we do these sessions or classes online. And my answer to that is yes, it is possible. And what I would like to share with you today is 3 simple things that we can do to make sure that our practices maintain the depth, the authenticity, and the integrity. And this is so important in these times because we all know that contemplative practices are needed in these times more than ever. So the 3 simple things are setting our intention, making the space sacred, and coming home to the practice. And I'll go through these for you now. So setting our intention, this is probably the most important aspect of a contemplative practice. And it completely underpins the quality of our practice at any session and what we experience during that practice. So what do I mean by setting our intention? When we were not doing practice online, we would have had to leave our place of work or home or wherever we were. We would have to change into our practice clothes, and we would travel to the venue or the studio where the session is being held. So what we are doing in this interval of time is that we are actually pouring all of our attention, our resources, and our energies, our weight into this preparation, into this intention that I am now getting ready for my practice. And this may seem like such an unimportant thing, but actually it is a vital part of any contemplation practice. And this setting our intention is something we do before every practice. So it is not that we set an intention at some point in time, but that we set this every single practice. And so this interval of time, this kind of half an hour or 15 minutes or whatever you can give yourself is really important to bring ourselves into the practice, to set that intention, to be at one with the practice, to take our mind away from all the other stories that has been happening, the events, and to just bring ourselves into this practice space. In ancient times, in the practice that I do, that's Indian dance contemplation, these practices used to happen in caves, in mountains, in the middle of forests. And so if people wanted to go to the practice, they had to leave the villages, they had to travel through the forest, and they had to go towards this mountain. So there was this real, it asked a certain intensity of intention. Are you really prepared to invest yourself in this practice now? And so that is that interval of time, getting out of our daily clothes that we're wearing and preparing ourselves. In Indian dance, it's actually called aharya, so that the clothes we wear, that preparation that seems so external is really an integral part of preparing for the practice. I would also suggest that when you finish the practice, that you give yourself a bit of a time, so you have a bit of a bookending, an interval of time before, interval of time after, and I usually suggest about half an hour, but whatever you can manage, 15 minutes. And that is because the practice stays, there is the movement of the practice in the body continues even after you stop moving or you feel like you stop moving the body. But that movement within your sensation, your feelings, your consciousness continues even after the practice. So once again, if you had been going to the studio, you would have had a little bit of time where you would change out of your practice clothes, and you would travel back to your home or wherever it is you were going to go. And that time is precious because it allows the practice to seep in, to find a home in your body, and to settle in. So that is setting the intention. The second thing that can help you is making your space sacred. And this is vitally important too, because we are now practicing at home, and that is very convenient. It's terribly convenient. But it also has some problems with it, and that is that it takes away from the space holding the practice. So we are at home, we can roll out of our beds literally and turn on our computers for the practice, or we can have the browser of the work open and then just open another browser and go on Zoom. So while it is convenient, it does actually take away from the intentionality of the space. So just like setting the intentionality that a space holds is also vitally important for that practice constellation, as I call it, of contemplation. So what I would suggest is, and I suggest this to the participants in my own individual programs and classes, is that you find a space in your home that is your practice space. So that if you can, that is not where you work, that is something that you can, claim for yourself as a practice space. And what you do is, as a part of your preparation for the classes, you prepare the space. So I suggest, when it is safe to do so, I suggest that you light some candles, you bring some flowers, you light incense, again, if that is safe for you to do that. But something that makes that space special, that space sacred, if you could call it that. But it's like you claiming that space for the practice. Just like you claim your attention, you claim your body, you claim your space for the practice. Now, if you cannot have a separate space, you can still do these little things to make the space, to prepare the space for the practice. So the temptation to be casual, because it's so convenient, it actually starts to erode the quality of the practice. On the one hand, there is the convenience, but like anything, it is a bit of a double-edged sword. So it can also actually erode the quality of the practice. And the other thing, again, it seems like it's so obvious, but it's really worth reminding, is that we do not have distractions in the space. So if you have a Zoom browser open, try not to have the browsers of your emails and the browsers of your Facebook open, and that you're not distracted by the number of emails going up or notifications from Facebook, that you really maintain that cleanliness of the space, just as you would if you went into the studio. There'd be very few, if any, contemplation studios that would allow you to have mobile phones and other distractions in the space. So it's just having that same sense of making the space sacred. And this is really important when we are not going into spaces where somebody else has done the work for you, in a studio, for example, but we have to then do some of that to make sure that that space, and the space is actually part of what in Indian dance we called aharya. It is not just the body, but anything that supports the practice, which includes the space, is really important. So making your space sacred. And the third suggestion is coming home to the practice. So here's the thing, there's such a magic about this time, and I tell this to the participants in my own programs. I say the practice has come home to you, literally. The practice has come to your home. And so how do we come home to the practice? How do we find our home in the practice? And here's this wonderful opportunity to really taste the solitude that is at the heart of all contemplative practices, even Indian dance. Indian dance or yoga or any contemplative practice holds at its heart that solitude. Contemplation was never about forming a community. Of course, when there is a community of practice, that is a wonderful thing. But the power of contemplation is to be able to rest, to bring that practice into that space of rest, of home, of solitude. And when the practice is coming home to us, in our homes, in the places where we feel safe, we are at rest, and the beautiful invitation of the time is, can we also find that in the practice? How can we come to the solitude, come to that quietness? And I don't mean stillness, because some of our practices are movement. Indian dance is movement, but there is a stillness at the heart of movement. And that stillness emerges when we are at rest, when we stop demanding, when we stop trying to master the practice, when we stop trying to conquer the practice, when we stop comparing ourselves. When we are in a studio, inevitably, we are looking around, we are comparing, we are aware of other bodies. But here's this wonderful opportunity when we are home to just find our space, our home, our rest, our solitude, our quietude in the practice. So these three things, which is setting our intention, which is like having that bookend space, interval of time before and after the practice. Before, to bring yourself into the practice, giving yourself time to do that. And after, to allow the practice to just settle, seep in, and to kind of blossom and emerge in your body, in your consciousness. It will so make a difference to the quality of your practice each time. The second is to really pay attention to making the space sacred, doing something in that space for the time of the practice, and remove the things at the end of the practice so that it really is about claiming that space for the practice, for the time of the practice. And the third is, you are at home practicing and you are invited to find your home within the practice. Your home. It is not about comparing, contrasting, and nothing at all. It's just what is your resting place, your place of solitude, your place of tranquility, safety, rest, and home in the practice. So I do hope that these three things will help you. I know they have helped the participants in my classes to continue to practice with depth, with integrity, and with authenticity. I wish all of you doing contemplative practices so much help and support and enrichment during these times, because these practices are so needed, not just for us individually, but for the times that we live in.